She was hired to write his fake marriage contract. She found an error that could have cost him everything. When his bride backed out, and he looked at her and said, "You understand what I need. Be the one who stays." She wrote herself an exit clause worth millions. When he pinned her against the wall and whispered, "Tell me to stop," she realized the exit clause she wrote meant nothing. She could walk away with $3 million. Instead, she did something unthinkable. Welcome to Maya's Romance Tales, where love always wins. Before we dive right in, kindly subscribe if you haven't already and let us know where you are watching from. Elena Vasquez had spent 7 years reading contracts the way some people read novels, finding stories buried in subclauses and secrets hidden in the fine print. She had never, not once, misread a document. So when she walked into the 42nd floor conference room of Mercer Sterling Law and saw 12 attorneys arguing over a marriage contract they had clearly reviewed a dozen times, she knew something was wrong before she even sat down. The room smelled like cold coffee and desperation. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed a gray Manhattan morning, the kind of sky that promised rain but never delivered. Elena took her seat at the far end of the table, the spot reserved for contract attorneys who were meant to be invisible, useful, and forgettable. She was very good at being all three. "The terms are ironclad," said a silver-haired partner whose name she had already forgotten. "Mr. Wells needs this finalized by Friday. The grandmother's condition is deteriorating, and the inheritance stipulation is clear. He must be married by his 35th birthday or the entire estate reverts to a charitable trust." Elena flipped through the contract while they talked, her pen moving silently across the margins. The bride-to-be was named Clarissa Montgomery, a socialite with the right pedigree and the right connections. The terms were generous. 2 years of marriage, separate lives, a 7-figure settlement upon completion. Clean. Simple. Boring. Except it was not clean at all. "There's a problem," Elena said. The room went quiet. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward her as if she had spoken in a foreign language. "Excuse me?" The silver-haired partner's voice carried the particular disdain reserved for people who interrupted their betters. Page 47, Clause 19, subsection C. Elena did not look up from the document. The liquidation timeline for the medical trust conflicts with the marriage duration requirement. If the marriage ends before 26 months, the sister's care funding gets frozen for a minimum of 90 days while the estate reassesses beneficiary status. The silence that followed was different. Heavier. "That's impossible," someone said. "We've reviewed this contract 17 times, according to the version history." Elena finally looked up. "You reviewed it 17 times and missed the fact that this contract could leave his sister without medical funding for 3 months. In her condition, I assume that's not acceptable." The door at the head of the conference room opened. Elena had seen photographs of Dominic Wells. The financial pages loved him, the gossip columns worshipped him, and every magazine with a pulse had put his face on their cover at least twice. But photographs were flat, contained things. They did not capture the way he moved like he owned not just the room but the air inside it. They did not capture the way his eyes, gray and cold as the sky outside, swept across the table and landed on her with the precision of a predator identifying prey. "Who found the error?" His voice was low, controlled, the kind of voice that never needed to be raised because it commanded attention at any volume. "The contract attorney," the silver-haired partner said quickly. "She's temporary, Mr. Wells. We'll have her sign an NDA immediately and—" "Her name?" the partner stammered. Elena watched Dominic's jaw tighten with what might have been impatience or might have been something far more dangerous. "Elena Vasquez," she said, saving the man from further embarrassment. "And the NDA is already signed. It was a condition of my assignment." Dominic walked toward her end of the table. 12 attorneys parted like the Red Sea, and Elena realized with a strange clarity that she was not afraid. She should have been. This man could end her career with a phone call, could make sure she never worked in New York again. But she had spent her whole life reading people, and what she read in Dominic Wells was not cruelty. It was exhaustion. It was fear. It was a man holding something together with nothing but willpower and sheer, stubborn pride. "You read the medical trust provisions," he said. It was not a question. "I read everything." "And what else did you see that my 17 reviews missed?" Elena held his gaze. "Nothing I'm prepared to discuss in a room full of people who clearly can't keep a secret." Someone gasped. The silver-haired partner looked like he might have a stroke. But Dominic Wells, the man the tabloids called the Ice King of Wall Street, smiled. It was not a warm smile. It was the smile of a man who had finally found something worth his attention. "Clear the room," he said. They left in a rush of expensive suits and wounded egos, until it was just Elena and Dominic and 63 pages of contract that suddenly felt like something much more complicated. "Tell me," he said. Elena set down her pen. "The prenuptial agreement references a moral turpitude clause that could be weaponized if anyone discovers the marriage is a business arrangement. Your bride-to-be has a documented history of indiscretion. One photograph, one witness, one scorned ex-boyfriend, and you lose everything. Not just the inheritance. Your reputation. Your company's stock price. Your sister's future. You know about my sister. The medical trust is in her name." It wasn't hard to figure out. Dominic pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. He was close enough now that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive that made her think of leather and firelight. Close enough that she could see the shadows under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands gripped the edge of the table like he was holding himself back from something. "Everyone thinks I'm doing this for the money," he said quietly. $400 million. They think I'm the greedy bastard fighting for his inheritance. But you're not. My sister has a degenerative condition. The treatments that keep her alive cost more than most people make in a lifetime. Our grandmother's estate funds a trust that covers everything, but only if I meet the inheritance requirements. Only if I marry before my birthday. And Clarissa Montgomery? A business arrangement. She needed money, I needed a wife. It should have been simple." Elena thought about the woman's reputation, her documented instability, the way the contract had been structured to protect Dominic but left his sister vulnerable. It was never going to be simple. "You just wanted it to be. You're very honest for someone who should be trying to keep her job." "I'm very honest because I don't care about keeping this job. I care about doing it right." Dominic studied her for a long moment. Elena let him look, let him see whatever he needed to see. She had nothing to hide and nothing to prove. She was exactly what she appeared to be, a woman who understood contracts and the people who needed them. "The error you found," he said finally. "Can you fix it?" "Yes." "And the vulnerability with Clarissa?" "That's harder. The weakness isn't in the contract. It's in your choice of bride." "Then help me choose a different one." Elena almost laughed. "I'm a contract attorney, Mr. Wells. I don't arrange marriages." "No." He leaned closer, and something in his eyes shifted, warmed, became something almost human. "But you understand them. You understand what I'm trying to protect and why. You see things other people miss. I need someone like that." "Someone like what?" "Someone who can read a room the way you read that contract. Someone who can stand next to me at my grandmother's estate and convince her that I'm not making the biggest mistake of my life. Someone who won't fold under pressure or sell me out to the tabloids the moment things get difficult." The implication hung in the air between them. Elena felt her pulse quicken, felt the strange electricity that had been building since he walked into the room. "You're not asking me to fix your contract," she said slowly. "You're asking me to be in it." Clarissa backed out this morning. She found a better offer, apparently. A tech billionaire with fewer complications. He said it without bitterness, which told Elena he had never cared about the woman at all. "I have 3 weeks until my birthday. 3 weeks to find someone willing to marry me, convince my dying grandmother it's real, and protect my sister's future. The contract attorneys at this firm missed an error that could have cost me everything. You found it in 15 minutes. That doesn't make me qualified to be your wife." "No. But it makes me curious about what else you might be qualified for." Elena stood up, needing distance, needing to think. She walked to the window and stared out at Manhattan, at the city that had never once given her anything for free. She had fought for every opportunity, scraped for every success, built a career out of being smarter and more careful than everyone around her. And now the most powerful man she had ever met was offering her something that could change everything. What would the terms be? Generous. More generous than Clarissa's, given the circumstances. A 2-year arrangement with full benefits. A settlement of $3 million upon completion. And, he paused, and she heard him rise from his chair, heard him move toward her with steps that were somehow both silent and impossible to ignore. An exit clause. An exit clause? Written by you. Any terms you want, any conditions you require. If you ever want to leave, you can. No penalties, no consequences. The payout remains intact. Elena turned to face him. He was close now, closer than he should have been, close enough that she could see the gray of his eyes shift to something almost silver in the morning light. "You're giving me all the power," she said. "I'm giving you a choice." "That's not the same thing." "It feels like the same thing." "Then you don't know what real power looks like." He reached up, slowly, giving her time to step back, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The touch was nothing, a whisper of contact, but it sent heat cascading down her spine. "I'm asking you to trust me, Elena. And I'm giving you every reason not to." "Why?" "Because I want you to stay anyway." Elena thought about all the contracts she had read, all the relationships she had watched fall apart in conference rooms just like this one. She thought about her apartment with its leaking ceiling and her student loans and the career that had stalled somewhere between talented and invisible. She thought about the way Dominic looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had not known he was asking. "I'll need to review the terms," she said finally. "Of course. And I'll write my own exit clause. I would expect nothing less. And if I agree to this, you need to understand something." She stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them until they were sharing the same air, the same space, the same dangerous possibility. "I read people, Mr. Wells. I know when they're lying. I know when they're hiding something. And I know that whatever you're telling yourself about this arrangement, whatever you're pretending not to feel, it won't stay hidden forever." "Is that a warning?" "It's a promise." Something flickered in his eyes. "Want, maybe. Or fear. Or the intoxicating combination of both." "Then I accept your terms," he said. "All of them." The wedding was a quiet affair, conducted in a judge's chambers with 2 witnesses from the firm and a photographer whose pictures would be released to carefully selected outlets. Elena wore a cream-colored dress that someone else had chosen. They signed the papers with identical pens, said the required words, and became husband and wife in less time than it took to order lunch. The penthouse was on the 73rd floor of a building that had no name, only an address whispered among Manhattan's elite. Elena walked through the front door and understood immediately that she was entering a world she had only ever observed from the outside. "Your room is on the left," Dominic said, setting down his keys. "Mine is on the right." The bathroom is shared, but we can work out a schedule. How domestic. How necessary. He loosened his tie, and Elena watched the gesture with more attention than it deserved. My grandmother expects us for dinner on Friday. She lives on the family estate in Connecticut. We'll need to appear comfortable with each other by then. Comfortable how? Married. Affectionate. Convincing. I can be convincing. I know. He moved past her toward the kitchen, and his shoulder brushed against hers with casual intimacy. That's why I chose you. The first week was strange. Elena worked from the penthouse during the day, reviewing contracts and building the life she was supposed to be living. Dominic came and went at odd hours, always impeccable, always distant, always watching her when he thought she would not notice. She noticed everything. She noticed the way he avoided the photograph on the mantel, the one showing a young woman in a wheelchair with his same gray eyes. She noticed the phone calls he took in the middle of the night, his voice soft and worried in a way it never was during the day. She noticed the way his shoulders dropped when he thought he was alone, like he was carrying a weight that was slowly crushing him. She never let him know she knew. On the fourth night, the bathroom flooded. Elena discovered it at 2 in the morning when she stepped out of bed and found herself ankle-deep in water. She was still half asleep, still wearing nothing but an old t-shirt and shorts, when she pushed open the door and found Dominic already there, soaking wet and swearing at a burst pipe. "Don't just stand there," he said without looking up. "Hand me the towels." She handed him the towels. He was shirtless, she realized, his suit pants soaked and clinging to his legs, his hair dripping into his eyes. The water was everywhere, spreading across the marble floor like it was trying to claim the entire apartment. "This is your emergency response?" Elena asked, watching him shove towels against the base of the cabinet. "Yelling at plumbing? It's worked before." "Really? When?" "Never." He sat back on his heels and looked up at her, and something in his expression shifted. His eyes traveled down her body slowly, deliberately, taking in the wet hem of her shirt, the bare legs, the way the fabric clung to her skin. "You should probably go back to bed." "In the flood?" "In your room. Which is not currently underwater." "My room is down the hall." "The hall is underwater." "I checked." Dominic closed his eyes like he was praying for patience. "Fine. Take my room." "Where will you sleep?" "I won't." He stood up, and the movement brought him close to her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his skin despite the cold water lapping at their ankles. "I have calls to make. People to yell at. A building manager to destroy. It's 2 in the morning. I'm aware. You haven't slept in 3 days." He went still. "How do you know that?" "I told you." Elena reached up and touched his face, a gesture she had not planned, a contact she could not take back. His skin was warm beneath her fingertips, his jaw rough with stubble. "I read people." "And what are you reading right now?" "A man who thinks he has to do everything alone. A man who believes that admitting weakness is the same as being weak. A man who is so focused on protecting everyone else that he's forgotten someone should be protecting him." Dominic caught her wrist, held it against his chest. She could feel his heart beating beneath her palm, fast and unsteady. "You shouldn't say things like that," he said quietly. "Why not?" "Because it makes me want things I can't have. According to the contract, you can have quite a lot. Not this." His thumb traced a circle on the inside of her wrist, a touch so light it was almost imaginary. "Not you." "Not really." The contract says. "The contract says we're married. It doesn't say we're together. There's a difference." Elena pulled her hand back slowly, feeling the absence of his touch like a wound. "You're right. I'm sorry." Don't apologize. I'm the one who—" He stopped, ran a hand through his wet hair, looked at her with something close to desperation. "This is harder than I expected." "What is?" "Living with someone I actually want to talk to." The words hung between them, more intimate than any touch could have been. Elena thought about the exit clause she had written, the power it gave her, the safety it promised. She could leave any time. She could take her money and walk away and never look back. She was starting to realize she did not want to. "Go make your calls," she said finally. "I'll deal with the water." "You don't have to." Dominic. His name felt strange in her mouth, too personal, too real. "Go." He went. And Elena spent the next hour mopping up water and trying not to think about the way he had looked at her, the way his heart had raced beneath her palm, the way he had said her name like it was something precious. The grandmother's estate was everything Elena had expected and nothing she was prepared for. The main house was a colonial revival mansion surrounded by gardens that had been tended for generations, all of it maintained by a staff that moved like ghosts through the halls. Dominic's grandmother was 93 years old and sharp as a blade. Her name was Eleanor Wells, and she received them in a sitting room filled with family photographs and the faint smell of roses. "So this is the woman you married," Eleanor said, studying Elena with eyes that missed nothing. "A contract attorney. How unusual." "Unusual can be good," Elena replied. "Unusual can be dangerous. Unusual can be exactly what my grandson needs or exactly what destroys him." Eleanor gestured for them to sit, and Elena noticed the slight tremor in her hands, the careful way she moved. "Tell me about yourself, Mrs. Wells." "Mrs. Wells." Elena felt Dominic tense beside her, felt his hand find hers with a naturalness that surprised them both. "I grew up in the Bronx," Elena said. "My mother cleaned offices. My father left when I was 6. I put myself through law school and I've been fighting ever since." "Fighting for what?" "For everything. For the chance to be in rooms like this. For the right to be taken seriously. For the life I was never supposed to have." Eleanor's expression softened, just slightly. "And my grandson? What are you fighting for with him?" Elena looked at Dominic, at the man who had hired her to play a part and then made it impossible to remember she was acting. "I'm fighting to understand him. He doesn't make it easy." "No. The Wells men never do." Eleanor reached for a photograph on the table beside her, a picture of a young woman with dark hair and Dominic's gray eyes. "Do you know about Isabella? His sister?" "Yes." "Did he tell you about her condition? About what the treatments cost? About what he's willing to sacrifice to keep her alive?" "He told me enough." "Then you know this isn't about money." "It was never about money." "I know." Eleanor set down the photograph and fixed Elena with a look that felt like an interrogation. "My grandson has been engaged twice before. Both times, the women left when they realized he would always put his sister first. That his money, his time, his entire life would be devoted to keeping her healthy. They wanted a husband, not a caretaker. They wanted love that put them at the center. Do you understand what I'm telling you? You're asking if I can handle coming second. I'm asking if you already know that you do." Elena squeezed Dominic's hand without looking at him. "I've spent my whole life coming second, Mrs. Wells. To men who talked over me in meetings. To colleagues who took credit for my work. To a world that never expected me to succeed. The difference is, your grandson doesn't treat me like second place. He treats me like a partner." The words were supposed to be a performance. They were supposed to be the lie she had agreed to tell. But somewhere between the penthouse and this room, between the flooded bathroom and the sleepless nights, they had become true. Dominic's grip on her hand tightened. Eleanor studied them for a long moment, and then she smiled. It was a small smile, tired and knowing, but it was real. "Isabella wants to meet you," she said. "She's in the garden. Dominic, why don't you give your wife the tour?" The garden was beautiful in the late afternoon light, all golden shadows and flowers that seemed to glow from within. Isabella Wells sat in a wheelchair beneath an ancient oak tree, a book open in her lap and a blanket covering her legs. She was 28 years old, 5 years younger than her brother, and she had his eyes exactly. The gray that shifted to silver. The intelligence that never stopped calculating. But where Dominic's gaze was guarded, hers was open. Curious. Almost mischievous. "You're the contract attorney," Isabella said as they approached. "The one who found the error. News travels fast. I have spies everywhere." She grinned, and Elena liked her immediately. "Sit down. Both of you. I want to hear everything." "There's not much to tell," Dominic said, taking the seat beside his sister. "We met. We fell in love. We got married." "Liar." Isabella's grin widened. "You've never fallen in love in your life. You've fallen in mergers and acquisitions. You've fallen in spreadsheets and projections. But love? That's not really your thing. Maybe people change. Maybe they do." Isabella turned to Elena, her expression suddenly serious. "He's protecting you, you know. Whatever he's told you about this arrangement, whatever terms he's offered, he's making sure you have a way out. That's how he shows he cares. He gives people escape routes." "I know. And you're staying anyway." "I am." "Why?" Elena thought about the question, about all the answers she could give. The money. The opportunity. The life she had always wanted. But none of those were true anymore. "Because he looked at me like I was worth seeing," she said finally. "And no one has ever looked at me like that before." Isabella's eyes glistened. She reached out and took Elena's hand, her grip surprisingly strong. "Then stay," she said. "Stay and make him believe he's worth seeing too." The drive back to Manhattan was quiet. Dominic stared out the window while Elena replayed the day's conversations in her head, turning them over like evidence in a case she did not know how to win. "My grandmother likes you," he said eventually. "She was testing me. She tests everyone. You passed." "Did I?" Elena glanced at him, at the tension in his shoulders, the way he would not meet her eyes. It felt more like a warning. "What do you mean?" "She was telling me that you'll never put me first. That your sister will always come before anything else. That if I'm looking for a love story with a traditional ending, I'm in the wrong book." Dominic finally looked at her. "And what did you think of her warning?" "I thought it was the first honest thing anyone has said to me since this started." "Elena. I'm not complaining. I'm not asking for anything you haven't already offered. She stopped, searching for words that would not break the fragile thing between them. "I need you to know that I understand. What you're doing for Isabella. What you've sacrificed. What you're still willing to give up. I understand, and I'm not going anywhere. The exit clause is staying exactly where I wrote it. I'm not tearing it up. I'm not pretending it doesn't exist. But I'm also not using it. Not now. Maybe not ever." The car pulled up to the building, but neither of them moved to get out. The city glittered around them, indifferent to their small drama, and Elena waited. "I didn't expect you," Dominic said quietly. "I know. I thought this would be easy. A business arrangement. A transaction. I thought I could keep you at a distance and get through 2 years without," he stopped, his jaw tightening. "Without wanting more. And now? Now I'm afraid that wanting more might be the only thing I have left." Elena reached across the space between them and touched his face, the same gesture she had made in the flooded bathroom, the same contact that had started everything. "Then want more," she said. "And let me figure out what to do about it." His hand came up to cover hers, holding her palm against his cheek. "You deserve better than this. Better than a fake marriage and a dying grandmother and a man who can't even tell you." "Stop." She leaned closer, close enough that their breath mingled in the dark car. "Stop deciding what I deserve. Stop protecting me from yourself. If I wanted to leave, I would leave. But I'm here. I'm staying. And you need to start asking yourself why that terrifies you so much." "Because it does," he whispered. "Terrify me." "Good." She smiled, and it felt dangerous, like she was standing on the edge of a cliff and choosing to jump. "Now you know how I feel every time you look at me." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of public appearances and private negotiations. They were photographed at restaurants, at charity events, at a gallery opening where Dominic's hand never left the small of her back. The tabloids ran headlines about the mysterious woman who had captured the Ice King's heart, and Elena read every article with a mixture of amusement and dread. Because the longer this went on, the harder it became to remember where the performance ended and the truth began. They developed a routine in the penthouse. Morning coffee, taken separately but in the same room. Evening dinners, ordered in and eaten at the kitchen counter while they argued about everything from contract law to the proper way to make a martini. Late nights when one of them could not sleep and found the other awake too, sharing silence and the comfort of another human presence in the dark. And then Victoria Sterling arrived. She showed up at a charity gala with a smile that did not reach her eyes. Victoria had been Dominic's first fiancée, the one who had left when she realized his sister would always come first. She was tall and blonde and beautiful in the way that made other women feel small. "So you're the replacement," Victoria said, cornering Elena near the bar while Dominic was across the room. The contract attorney playing house. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "We don't need to meet. I know exactly who you are. I know exactly what this arrangement is. And I know exactly how long it's going to last." Elena felt her pulse quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. "I'm afraid I don't know what you mean. The marriage is fake." Victoria's smile widened. "The love is fake. Everything about this precious little story is fake. And I'm going to prove it." "Why would you do that?" "Because Dominic humiliated me. He let me believe I was going to be his wife, and then he threw me away like I was nothing. He deserves to lose everything, and his sick sister deserves to know that her precious brother isn't the saint everyone thinks he is." Elena stepped closer to Victoria, close enough that no one else could hear. "You broke off the engagement. I read the records. You left him because you didn't want to share him with someone who needed him more. That's not humiliation. That's just bad judgment." Victoria's expression flickered. "You don't know what you're talking about." "I know exactly what I'm talking about. I know that you've been feeding stories to the press for months. I know that you've been trying to find evidence that this marriage isn't real. And I know that you're going to fail, because whatever this arrangement started as, it's not that anymore." "Really?" Victoria's laugh was sharp, brittle. "Then prove it. Kiss him right now, in front of everyone. Let me see how much you actually want each other." Elena spotted Dominic across the room. He was watching them, his expression unreadable, his body tense with the awareness that something was wrong. "Stay here," Elena said to Victoria. "Watch carefully." She walked across the ballroom floor like she was walking toward a cliff edge. The crowd parted around her, and she saw Dominic's expression shift from concern to confusion to something that looked almost like hope. "Elena," he said when she reached him. "What's going on? Your ex-fiancé just threatened to expose us." She's watching right now, waiting for proof that this is all a lie. Then we should leave. We should. We should give her something to believe. She took his face in her hands and kissed him. It was supposed to be brief. It was supposed to be a performance, the same way everything else had been a performance. But the moment her lips touched his, something changed. His hands came up to grip her waist, pulling her closer. Her fingers tangled in his hair. The kiss deepened, and deepened again, until she forgot they were in a crowded ballroom, forgot Victoria was watching, forgot everything except the way he tasted and the way he held her like she was something he was afraid to lose. When they finally broke apart, his eyes were dark and his breathing was uneven. "That wasn't in the contract," he said. "No." Elena's voice was rough, her heart hammering against her ribs. "That was something else entirely." They went home early. Neither of them spoke in the car, but his hand found hers in the darkness and did not let go. When they reached the penthouse, when the door closed behind them and they were finally alone, he pressed her back against the wall and looked at her like she was the answer to every question he had ever been afraid to ask. "Tell me to stop," he said. "Tell me this is wrong." "It's wrong." "Then why aren't you leaving?" "Because I don't want to be right anymore. I want to be here. With you." His forehead dropped to rest against hers. "The exit clause. You can still use it. You can still walk away with everything I promised." "I know." "Then why don't you?" Elena thought about the contract she had written, the power she had given herself, the safety net that had seemed so essential when this began. She thought about Victoria's threats and Eleanor's warnings and Isabella's hope. She thought about everything she stood to lose if this went wrong. "Because some things are worth more than a payout," she said. "And you're one of them." He kissed her again, softer this time, gentler, like he was learning a language he had never been taught. When they finally pulled apart, when they finally retreated to their separate rooms with the promise of something more hanging between them, Elena lay awake in the dark and realized that she had stopped pretending. This was real now. And everything that came next would be real too. The article appeared 3 days later. Victoria had kept her promise. The headline screamed across every tabloid in the city, "Wells' marriage a sham." Inside sources revealed. Contract uncovered. And then, the worst part, sister's medical care in jeopardy as inheritance hangs in balance. Elena found Dominic in the living room at 3 in the morning, staring at his phone like it held his death sentence. "The funding is frozen," he said without looking up. "Until the estate trustees investigate the claims, Isabella's accounts are locked. Her next treatment is scheduled for Monday. If we can't," his voice broke. "If we can't prove the marriage is real, we will." "How?" He finally looked at her, and she saw something she had never seen before. Defeat. Complete and utter defeat. How do we prove something that started as a lie? How do we convince anyone that it became real when there's a signed contract saying exactly what we agreed to? "Your grandmother." "My grandmother is dying. Her doctors called this morning. She doesn't have much time left, and the stress of this. Your grandmother already knows." Dominic went still. "What?" "She knew from the beginning. I could see it in the way she looked at us, the questions she asked. She wasn't testing to see if the marriage was real. She was testing to see if it could become real. And it did. You don't know that." "I do." Elena took his hands, held them tight. "I'm going to go to her. Alone. Tomorrow morning. I'm going to tell her everything, and I'm going to trust that she loves you enough to help us. And if she doesn't? If she decides the terms of the will weren't met and Isabella loses everything? Then we'll find another way. But we won't find it if we don't try." Dominic stared at her for a long moment. Then he pulled her into his arms and held her like she was the only thing keeping him standing. "Why are you doing this?" he whispered into her hair. "Because you asked me once to stay anyway. And I did." The drive to Connecticut felt longer this time, heavier with the weight of everything that could go wrong. Elena walked into the estate alone, just as she had promised, and found Eleanor Wells waiting in the same sitting room where they had first met. The old woman looked smaller now, frilier, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. "You came alone," Eleanor said. "That's interesting. I came to tell you the truth." "The truth that my grandson married you under a business arrangement? The truth that Victoria Sterling has been spreading across every newspaper in the city?" "Yes." Elena sat down across from her, refusing to look away. "All of it. The contract. The terms. The exit clause that gives me every power and him none. All of it is true." Eleanor was silent for a long moment. "And yet you're here." "I'm here because somewhere between the conference room and the flooded bathroom and the way he looks at me when he thinks I'm not watching, I fell in love with him. I fell in love with a man who would sacrifice everything for his sister, who carries the weight of his entire family on his shoulders, who gave me the power to destroy him and trusted me not to use it. Love isn't enough. No. But it's a start. And I'm not here to ask you to overlook the contract or pretend it doesn't exist. I'm here to tell you that whatever this started as, it's not that anymore. And if you need to punish someone for the deception, punish me. Let Dominic keep the inheritance. Let Isabella keep her treatments. But don't let Victoria's revenge destroy everything your grandson has worked for." Eleanor reached across the space between them and took Elena's hand. Her grip was weak but warm, and her eyes, those gray eyes that Dominic had inherited, were filled with something that looked almost like peace. "I knew," she said quietly. "From the moment you walked into this house, I knew the marriage wasn't real. But I also knew something else." "What?" "That it would be. That my grandson had finally found someone who could see him for who he really is. Someone who would stay." "You're not angry?" "I'm dying." Eleanor smiled, and it was the most genuine expression Elena had ever seen on her face. "I don't have time for anger. All I have time for is making sure my family is protected. And you, Elena Vasquez, are exactly what they need." "Then you'll help us?" "I'll do better than that. I'll make sure Victoria Sterling never threatens my family again." The next week moved like a dream. Eleanor's lawyers worked with terrifying efficiency, and within days, the funding was restored, Victoria's sources were discredited, and the inheritance was secure. Dominic's birthday came and went without fanfare, marked only by a quiet dinner at the penthouse and a phone call from Isabella that left him smiling for the first time in weeks. But Elena knew there was still one thing left to do. "The contract," she said one evening, holding the document she had retrieved from the law firm's files. "We should talk about it." Dominic looked up from his laptop. "What about it?" "It's fulfilled. Your birthday passed. The inheritance requirements are met. According to the terms, we can start the dissolution process whenever you're ready." She held out the papers, and he stared at them like they were written in a foreign language. "You want to leave? I'm giving you the option. The same option you gave me from the beginning. The exit clause works both ways now. You can walk away with no consequences, no penalties. We can go back to our separate lives and pretend this never happened. And if I don't want to pretend?" Elena's heart stopped. "Then we need a different contract." Dominic stood up, crossed the room, and took the papers from her hands. He looked at them for a long moment, at the signatures and clauses and carefully worded terms that had brought them together. Then he tore them in half. "I don't want a contract," he said. "I want you. Without conditions. Without exit clauses. Without any of the safety nets we've been hiding behind since this started. That's terrifying. I know. He cupped her face in his hands, the same gesture she had made so many times before, the same contact that had changed everything. But some things are worth being terrified for. And I'm one of them. You're the only one. The courthouse steps were cold in the early morning light. Elena wore a simple white dress, no veil, no train, nothing but the woman she had always been, standing on the threshold of the woman she was about to become. Dominic waited at the top of the stairs, and beside him, in a wheelchair adorned with white ribbons, sat Isabella. She was holding a bag of rice and grinning like she had won a prize. No guests, Elena said as she climbed the stairs. That was the deal. Technically, she's family. She doesn't count as a guest. That's the worst logic I've ever heard. It worked, didn't it? Elena reached the top of the stairs and took his hands. The judge was waiting inside, ready to make official what had been real for longer than either of them wanted to admit. Last chance, Dominic said quietly. The exit clause might be gone, but you can still walk away. You can still choose differently. Elena thought about everything she had learned in the past months. About contracts and clauses and the limits of legal protection. About love that started as a business arrangement and ended as something she could not live without. About a man who gave her power and then trusted her with his heart anyway. I already chose, she said. I chose you. The ceremony was brief, witnessed only by Isabella and a clerk who seemed entirely unimpressed by the whole affair. But when Dominic kissed her, when he held her like she was precious and impossible and entirely his, Elena knew that this was the moment she had been waiting for her whole life. They walked down the courthouse steps together, husband and wife for real this time, and Isabella threw rice with the enthusiasm of someone who had been waiting years for this moment. Welcome to the family, she called out as the rice scattered around them. Try not to let him scare you off. I don't scare that easily. I know. Isabella's smile softened. That's why you're perfect for him. Elena looked at Dominic, at the man who had hired her to read a contract and ended up giving her a life, and she smiled. No, she said. That's why we're perfect for each other. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.